On today's episode, I am excited to have a conversation with what I would consider he would be the most interesting man in the world in my book. I don't think it's the Dos Equis guy whatsoever. I think it's the guy that I'm about to talk with. He is proof that there is no limit to the amount of talent that one human being can possess. And he's just a dear, dear friend of mine since the day we met each other. And I just think the world of him and just everything that he brings artistically to everything that he does. And it's just going to be fun to get to know him better and find out more about his journey as an artist. So without further ado, it's a pleasure to have my pal, Mr. Art McNaughton, on the podcast. Hey, Art, how are you?
Brad, I could not be better. Thank you for that intro. That was quite something. And I am the most interesting man in the world.
You certainly are. You certainly are. I think that the term Renaissance man does not get used in the proper way anymore, but you hold that title as well as anyone that I know. So.
Well, thank you. I'm really honored to have you say that, but sometimes what do they say? Master of none. How's that saying go? I think I heard somebody else say that in one of the interviews.
Jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah,
there you go. So but I'm working on it. So, and maybe when I grow up, I'll be a master of one of these things. So.
Well, it's, and for folks that are about to get to know you, and we'll talk about all these different facets, but I met you years ago in the music world, you playing drums. We played a bunch of gigs together over the years, just so many fun gigs over the years. And then you were like, oh, I want to learn how to play the mandolin. So you got a mandolin and you've been learning how to play that. And then you're like kind of this inventor on the drum kit as well and doing that. But then you have this whole other life as this visual artist. And we'll talk about that too. And you're incredibly successful. I just wonder, how do you find the time in your life? We'll start here and then we'll go back and find out where it all started. But
that is a good question, because I was thinking about that and, dedicating time, and you really got to be very judicious with your time and try to spread it out, which is probably why I'm trying not to play as much now, because I'm trying to do more and more as things are progressing. But as far as the mandolin goes, you can blame that on David Ellis, our mutual friend.
Yes.
So, and you were there when I did this. We were playing that Kentucky Derby party, and they want us to go out on the front porch. And you guys are playing, and David says, go grab my mandolin. And so I went and grabbed it, and I go to hand it to him. He says, no, put it on. I'm going to show you this. And all I did start chunking and playing rhythm. And I thought that was fun. So the more I started doing it, I said, well, I'm going to learn how to play some chords. And I did pick up a mandolin, which is up here on the wall behind me. But then I just started learning some simple chords and doing that. And so that's what David and I do every now and then. I'm certainly no mandolin player, but I love it. The other thing about it is playing an instrument like that. I've started singing more, and it helps me. And you might be able to do this, put the auto tune on so I don't sound so nasally when this thing's finally produced. I'm still working on that. But, that I've always sang as a drummer, but never as a lead singer. And it helps to have an instrument like that, to just something that's you can relate to, and it helps you find your notes, figure out what you got to do.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And I think everyone, I think there's a lot of value in bringing a vocal approach to whatever it is you're playing. And I'd be curious to know, did you start out singing and playing drums? Has it always been together, or was it something you added?
No, it was something that I added. I'll tell you, I started singing out of necessity. But back when I was a kid, I always, just like many of us, I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Thought that was so cool, and I wanted to play drums. And that I was bit by the bug, and I wanted it, and tried to get my parents to buy me drums. And we've got 6 kids in our family. None of us weren't wealthy. We're living on the south side of Chicago. And my mom said one to me, if you learn how to play Wipeout, because I was listening to that on the radio, and she said, if you learn to play that, I'll get you some drums. Well, I did learn how to play it. And my brothers, my twin brother, I have a twin brother who plays bass. And my younger brother, Bob, we played in a talent show when I was in 7th grade. And I didn't have drums, but I borrowed this kid's drums that was there. And he had a band. And we got up and we played Wipeout. And we did first, we started off with the theme from Mission Impossible. I heard Steve Ward mention that he did that too. And I'm just like, wow, this is like deja vu. So we did that and we did Wipeout and everybody thought that was great. Here's the thing. None of us sang at that time. Plus, we're in an auditorium. We're in a gymnasium. They didn't have a PA really for us to sing into. So it was perfect because it was all instrumental. And I really didn't start singing until, my brothers and I put together a band, and I never really sang much. Even after that, even went through college. It wasn't until I really got into a band much later, the rhythm guitarist broke his wrist, and we had to hire another rhythm guitarist, but he sang all the harmony parts. Well, I had been doing it long enough. I knew where he was at. And that's what I started doing, was singing all the harmonies. And Larry Samples, who's a good friend of mine, was singing. And he's like, damn, he says, you got to keep doing that. And he says, you're singing your ass off now. And I'm like, but we sang well together. Larry has a baritone voice, and I could sing all those high nasally parts, and it worked out well. So that's how it all started. But then he wanted me to sing more leads, and I haven't. And now I've realized the problem for a lot of singers, at least for me is I never really knew what my range was, what key I could sing in. And it was great to hear Steve talking about how he started out as a singer, Steve Ward, and he considers himself a singer who supports it with guitar playing. And I thought that is absolutely perfect. So,
yeah. And I was talking with Tom Knight about this as well recently, just about the struggle, I guess, the dual role of a singer and a drummer. And I was wondering if, when you sing and play, where does that concentration lie for you? Do you have to, and I'll say for me, if I think about the drumming part too much, I feel like the vocal suffers, and vice versa. If I think of one more than the other, I kind of get in this little mental trap. How is that for you?
Yeah, I think what's happened is, because I sing, the more I sing, I totally agree with you. One thing will suffer for the other if you try to focus on one over the other. Although I think with singing and being a drummer, it's helped me become more of groove-oriented drummer. I've talked to a couple people where, I remember I read an interview with Phil Gould from Level 42. And when he got replaced as the drummer with that band, they brought in Gary Husbands, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
Just a monster player. And Phil said when he got replaced, he didn't feel bad. He was actually very comfortable with what he added vocally, and he was more of a groove-oriented player. And I said, that's exactly how I think it should be.
Yeah.
Another drummer friend of ours, if you know John Chalton.
Oh, yeah.
He and I have talked about the older we get, the less we play. And it becomes, and I think more drummers should sing earlier on in their career to get that, to help that transition become more simplistic, be more groove oriented, and you really get a feel for what that groove is.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think, if anything, at the very least, singing forces you to be more intentional about what you're playing.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, as a drummer and as a bass player, it is a challenge to play interesting parts while you're also trying to sing and do something musical with it, right? Yeah. It's like, as Pat Metheny says, music is hard. Music is hard. It's fun. It has moments where it feels easy, but there's a lot going on under the hood,
Yeah, right. But what did they say? It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everybody would do it.
That's right.
So it's, but it is good, but I truly believe, and I was just playing this weekend, and somebody was asking me, they've got two young kids. They said, I really think I'd like to get them involved in music, and I really want them to play drums. And I was really shocked to hear this. They've got 2 daughters, one's 3 and one's 6. They said, should we let them play drums? I said, oh, absolutely, you should.
Absolutely, you should.
There is, and get them involved as early as possible. Get them lessons. I never had lessons. I'm self-taught. And, I had a Haskell Haar rudiment book that I got from my high school music band instructor because I wanted to play so bad. And he said, well, you got to learn to read music. And so I played flute for a year so I could read music. And then he said, but while you're doing that, go through this Haskell Haar book, start looking at the rudiments. And, it was like reading Chinese to me,
Yeah.
You can imagine. And then, but eventually, I just remember after when I became a sophomore and, we went through marching band and he let me play drums in the marching band because I could learn the cadences that we had. They were pretty simplistic, learn those. And then, after that, I went back to playing flute until toward the end of the year, he let me play in the jazz band and the things. But he said to me, just keep learning, learn to do a roll, work on your double stroke roll. I sat for hours playing on the bottom of a gum rubber sole of a chukka boot from back in the 60s. And I just remember sitting there. And I remember one weekend I was just doing a double stroke roll. And then finally I got it. And I'm like, wow, there it is. That's it. So I just kept practicing that. But really what the big thing was, I remember this when I was playing a Sousa march, and I think we were doing Stars and Stripes, or what is it? Stars and Stripes Forever or whatever.
Yeah.
And where the 5-stroke roll comes in, and I'm like, wow, the light bulb went on and there it is. That's how that works and how that fit into that. And then you start to figure out where it goes from there. So I am certainly not a rudimental player, but that was sort of an epiphany for me.
Well, and I believe me, that story resonates with me. I had a band director that I still I feel like I'm forever indebted to him for pushing me to do more and more. And I started out in the Haskell Haar book like you did,
Mm-hmm.
and then started taking drum lessons with a private teacher and the whole deal. And for me, you telling the story about learning to play a drum roll, for me, it was like I parallel it to like when you're a kid and you're trying to learn how to ride a bicycle and you just keep falling over and you keep falling over. And all of a sudden it just happens and you're like, oh, okay, now I know how this works. That's the same feeling I had when I could start playing a
absolutely.
roll.
And I have to say, our band director, when I was in a freshman, here I am playing flute. I was trying to play that for about a week. And then I just went to him after had a meeting with him. I said, I want to quit band. I don't want to do this. He says, no, don't. And he encouraged me. He was the nicest guy. Mr. Lauderdale. I always remember him. And anyway, he encouraged me. That's when he said, let me get you this rudiment book. And I want you to look at this. And that's what started the whole thing. Because he had faith in me. He said, let's do this. Let's stay there and let's keep moving forward. And so I did. And then he kept letting me go and do things like play with the marching band, do this, learn these certain cadences. We're going to be in a parade. You can play with the marching band, do that, so on and so forth. And then later on, it was, we got into the jazz band, and the pep band was first. And he says, just kind of watch over the shoulder and see and follow the music, and let's do that. And that's how I did that. Kept going. And so it was really, high school was very instrumental, but I loved it. And then from there, by the time I was a junior, I was playing in the drum section and actually became section leader. So I learned to do timpani. I played snare drum, and it's high school. This isn't the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, but it's, a high school band. And it was fun. And it was, again, I have to thank my band directors for kind of encouraging that.
Yeah.
So I was just going to say, the other thing was when by the time I was a sophomore in high school, there was another talent show that was going on. And Roy and Bob and myself, Roy, my twin brother, and Bob, my younger brother, were still playing, and we were, Woodstock had come out on the movie, and we were just enthralled by that. Well, we learned to play Soul Sacrifice. And so we went into this talent show and we played Soul Sacrifice. And Bob really learned the guitar part. He did a great job pulling it together. And I was a Michael Shreve fanatic, and I loved his playing. And I was just, by that time, the rudiments were starting to fill in, got to do the drum solo. The place went up for grabs. So that is when I remember the band director noticing when I was playing drums there, he says, well, if you can do it there, you learn to read the music, you can do it with the jazz band and you can do it with the pep band. So that's why when he wanted me to start doing it. So sophomore year, I think, was really kind of a pivotal point for me. So it worked out, kept moving, progressing from there.
That's great. That is awesome.
Yeah.
One of the funny things that's happened for me doing this podcast is, I thought that I was going to be interviewing a lot of musicians and I have interviewed a lot of players from the Atlanta area because that's where I grew up and where I played the most. But I've also managed to meet and interview a lot of people from Chicago. It just seems like there's a lot of great musicians out of Chicago.
Paul Wertico is from Chicago.
Paul Wertico, Matt Kaminsky.
Yeah.
Howard Levy, who was on the show. He's not from Chicago, but that's where he went to college and that's where he kind of, cut his teeth.
It's a vibrant music scene, or at least it was for many, many years. I'm sure it still is. I haven't been there for a while. And my brothers still play up there. They're doing more acoustic gigs. But the one thing I wanted to go back to was I mentioned Santana and Soul Sacrifice. And one of the things that I remember as a kid getting that album, and I was enthralled by the album cover. And if you remember the studio album, the very first where it had that drawing as a lion, and then you start to look at it more and you start to see all these images inside this other image. Album covers were always a big, and for most of us who used to buy vinyl, the album cover sold those albums a lot of times.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the artwork that was on there really, I was always, as a kid, I was always drawing at a very, very young age. And I remember some family friends, my mom asking, she says, well, they're really into art, but they really like the music. What should I have them do? And they're saying, let them do both. Why stop them? And one woman who was a friend of the family, lived down the street, was an art director for an agency that did a lot of interior designs for McDonald's and things. She was a painter, very accomplished, who I remain friends with. She just passed away, I think, about 2 months ago. I think she was 97. But through Facebook, we had continued. She kept seeing my artwork, and she was always encouraging and always saying great things. But that's how I got into the whole art field, because I loved the album covers. And then, of course, I saw, Roger Dean, who did all of the Yes album covers.
The Yes albums, yeah.
And Frank Frazetta, Molly Hatchet, and numerous others. There was an illustrator by the name of Brad Holland, who I really liked. And I just really got into that. And so I used to do paintings on the back of jackets, denim jackets for kids. I charge them like $5 or $10. Some of them I did for free just because I wanted to do them. And I used to copy Frazetta stuff. And I was just talking to some of the guys I grew up with, and they're like, man, I wish I still had that jacket. Well, I still have one that I did. And it's on my website. You can see it. And it's actually for a high school student, painting a copy of a Frank Frazetta painting, it was pretty impressive, I thought. So
that is so awesome. Yeah, I'm such a fan of your drumming and your musicianship, but I am equally just as amazed and just enthralled by your visual art. It's unbelievable to me. You and I hung out a few months ago when you were up in St. Louis, and
Yeah.
just to look at some of the work that you've done is just mind blowing to me.
Do that. I think I was thinking about this before we started talking, is as important as it was where I was from coming from Chicago, when it was where I came from is equally as important, because that era of the 60s, things just exploded musically, artistically, just everything went in all different directions and just took off. And I was thinking, I know my twin brother, Roy, liked to draw as well. And he was also into art. He's now a bass player and a far better musician than I will ever be. But we used to take our things, are like our wastebasket in our bedroom, and we would take markers and we'd color them very like Paisley designs and all of the graphic designs from the 60s, very Peter Max like. And then, out came Yellow Submarine, and not only did you have this music that we were just totally in love with, you had the visual that really kind of cemented this 1960s era. And we were just, Peter Max did not work on that movie. A lot of people think he did it. He was an advisor early on. And I guess John Lennon wanted him to come to England to work on it and do the entire movie, but it would take him like almost 2 years of his life. So he said, I can't be away from my family that long. He gave them a name of somebody, I think some guy, German artist who was the German Peter Max. And he's the one who did the movie. But actually, a lot of the artwork from that in the movie, there was a studio, Pushpin Studios out of New York, and you've probably seen it, the Bob Dylan cover, the Bob Dylan silhouette with the hair, and that was Milton Glaser that did that. He also designed the I Love New York emblem, the I with the heart and Y, and they say that a lot of the imagery from Yellow Submarine comes from a lot of his influence in the commercial art industry. So I think commercial art really started to speak to me at a young age. And I loved Peter Max, who I did get to meet much later in life. We can talk about that. It's coming up. But
I think that era was just, I think a lot of the boundaries were just kind of blown away, and just in music and art, in everything, where it's just like, we're not going to live by these rules that we've been living by.
I read a book in college. Diane would say that's probably the only book I've ever read, but I read this book, and it was called The Courage to Create, and it was by Rollo May, and it was about the creative process. And basically what it was you got to tear down all the bounds, and you've got to tear everything down, start from scratch. And that's where creativity really comes from and how you move forward. And I think you see that in the music industry too. And I think in the 60s, that was happening quite a bit. I mean, look at Jimi Hendrix and what was happening. But I unfortunately, I think a lot of people perceive that as, drug usage helped them reduce their inhibitions, where I truly believe it was the culture. There were no bounds. Like you said, that's exactly right. And it helps them kind of go beyond it. So,
yeah, no, I totally agree. What you mentioned earlier about seeing that famous episode of The Beatles on Ed Sullivan. What was that? And I've heard so many musicians talk about that being that pivotal moment in their life when, most of the people were children when it happened.
Yeah.
But what was that experience like for you? And I guess my second part of that is, what does Ringo mean to you? What does Ringo's drumming mean to you?
What's interesting about that is, my aunt, who was really influential and was very close to us as we were growing up, had all these phenomenal jazz records, jazz from the Philharmonic, and she would let us hear recordings of Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich and Lionel Hampton, and it's just some phenomenal stuff. And all these big bands. And if I stayed over, we would stay overnight at her house every time, and she'd let us stay up and watch Johnny Carson. And if we were out, maybe I'd catch one of the big bands playing. Well, when the Beatles came on, it was like this sound that was as big as a 20-piece orchestra, but it was coming from four guys. It was so simple. I didn't realize it at that time, but I'm just like, this is amazing. And the reaction they got from the audience, and I'm just like, that's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, and I think I saw it, and I remember, I think when the first time I caught the tail end of it, so I didn't see them all on the first performance they did. Then I think they went and played in Florida or something after that. And then they came back 2 weeks later and did another show, and I caught that one. I remember seeing that exactly. And I said, this is mind-boggling. And that's when I said, this is so cool. This is just, it looks great. There's something about drums too that are very almost sculpture-like, that I think that kind of resonated with me too. Mm-hmm. And but to my thought, I have a greater appreciation of Ringo Starr now than I did back then, because I had all these other influences. Buddy Rich was always a big inspiration to me. What he did was just totally amazing to me. And then
did you ever get to see Buddy live?
Yeah, I did. We used to have this out on Navy Pier, which has now been developed. They used to have this Summerfest out there on Navy Pier, and they'd have all these stages floating around the pier. The pier goes out about a mile into Lake Michigan, different stages with different music on them. I happened to be there when Buddy Rich was playing, and I got to watch and see him play. And I was like blown away. Sitting outside, summer day, Lake Michigan behind him, the city of Chicago. It was totally magic. But he was phenomenal. Yeah. I didn't get to sit up right close to him and see him, but that was pretty cool. I did get to see, Louis Bellson. I went to a clinic and got to sit next to him and watch him play.
Wow.
Which was very cool. So, but yeah. But Ringo was very, like you say, I'm just so much more impressed with him now than I was.
Yeah.
And when you start to realize he's left-handed and he's playing right-handed, and I'm like, wow, that answers so many questions to me,
yeah.
How he would play.
I'm with you on it. I think the appreciation for him just gets bigger and bigger as time goes on. That those drum parts that he played were so important to those songs, but you could almost not even notice them unless if you wanted to. They were just, it was amazing what he did for those songs.
I would love to sit down with him and just talk to him about what he's done, because I'd like to know if it was something that he did, or did George Martin say, hey, maybe you should try this, or somebody else. I don't know if John or Paul or George said anything to him, but they were in a way, they were very unorthodox, but they worked so well with what they were doing. So
they packed a lot of pretty incredible information in like 2.5 to 3 minutes.
Exactly. And that's why I love some of their earlier stuff, the simplicity of the songs. And I always have this philosophy, and it doesn't resonate well with a lot of guitar players, but I always say the most important thing to any song is the melody and having a rhythm. So you don't need a guitar player. You don't need any of this. You just need somebody that can sing and something to keep time. And there's your song. And people need to be able to dance to it. And it's the rhythm. You're right. I agree with you. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So
now that's great. What other? So you were hearing a lot of jazz drummers, and then you were, you mentioned Hendrix. Did you like Mitch Mitchell? Did you go?
Mitch Mitchell was always great, and Ginger Baker. All those guys were really, I started looking at this timeline. When I first started out, we loved the Monkees, we loved the Beatles, and the Monkees. Then everybody started saying, well, they'd all play their own instruments. Yeah, but the songs are so darn good. And how can you not have good songs when you got Neil Sedaka and Carole King and Tommy Boyce, Bobby Hart writing all these songs.
Right.
They're phenomenal. And then I realized that's what it's all about. It's the songs, not about who or how you play it. And that's why I became aware at an early age of who Hal Blaine was. So,
oh, yeah.
And then they said, "Oh, did you know Hal Blaine played the monkey?" Oh, really? And so I found that out, and then I started discovering Hal Blaine played with Frank Sinatra, with the Beach Boys, with the Mamas and Papas, just everybody. And so he was the whole Wrecking Crew was so impressive, and he was my idol ever since then.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thousands of records that guy played on, it's just unbelievable. Yeah, that's great. When did you move to Atlanta?
2005.
And did you live anywhere in between, or was it from Chicago to Atlanta?
Right from Chicago to Atlanta. That was like cold turkey. It was like, cut it right off. What happened after I went to college at Millikan University in Decatur, got a degree in fine arts, and I got out of college and I said, what the hell am I going to do with this? And so fortunately, I had some graphic design background, and I got a job with this Ideal School Supply Company, which they're known for the Ingento paper cutters. Remember those the guillotine cutters you could cut your arm off with? Oh,
I work at a school, so I see one of those every day.
Yes,
yeah, I know.
Yeah. And that's what they're famous for. They made that. I worked there for 7 years. But what had happened in that time, the president of the company called me into his office one day. He says, "Hey, I got to show you something." And I go in, and he's got this computer. It was a Mac SE. And he said, "I got this, and I've got this laser printer. Why don't you take it home for the weekend and see what you can do with it?" And my boss was old school, doing keyline paste up. We were specking type. Specking type means you mark it up, figure out how it's going to fit on a page. I learned all this at Ideal, which was I was just willing to learn anything. I didn't care. And he said, "Take it home, learn." So I took it home, had the laser printer. After I finished playing Lode Runner for about the 100th time, I went and started playing with type and printing things out. Then I realized that, we would make up type galleys. We would spec type, send it out, and 2 days later, we would get it back so that we could complete a job. So I told my boss at the time, I said, we could set some type here. We could set it twice the size we need, put it in the stack camera, shoot it down, and in 20 minutes, we'd have all our type ready to go. And he says, "Oh, I don't know. He says, "We're not a desktop publisher. I don't think that's something we need." I said, "Yeah, but this has got a real specific purpose. We could do that." And that's what we did. And we started doing that. We saved a ton of money because we weren't sending things out. We saved a ton of time. When we had an emergency job that had to be done, we could get it done in 5 minutes instead of waiting an extra day to get something out and have it proofed. So it was very successful. Anyway, I outlasted my boss at this place and built up a small department of people and had more computers. And then, so I'm getting to the point where I come to Atlanta, but this is the roundabout way. So then I was talking to one of the vendors, and he was looking at it. He says, I've got this other customer that's looking for somebody that would really like you to come in and take a look at setting up a desktop publishing system for him. I said, "Well, sure, I'll talk to him." That company was Sanford Inc., makers of Sharpie markers. Mm-hmm. I went in, I interviewed, and I got the job. And I was told, "Well, we've ordered some computers," but the woman that hired me said, I'm leaving on maternity leave, and I'll see you in about 4 months." So I had all this other work that it had to be done that was going on. I don't think it was 4 months. But it sure seemed like forever before she came back. And so I had these projects that needed to get done, and I just went through them because I knew what needed to be done, got them done, and it made me sit very favorably with the president of the company. He really liked that. And so I just continued. I became creative director at Sharpie. I was there for 15 years doing that job. And it was, and I'm going to tell you, this was the best job that I have ever had. I got to travel the world. I got to travel the United States. I think I've been to just about every state in the U.S. Went to New York City several times. We were doing licensing with Nickelodeon Studios, Major League Baseball, NFL. So I've been to all of their headquarters. I've been to, and that's how I got to meet Peter Max. I was in New York City, and we also had a line of art products. And the marketing manager called me up and said, hey, I was in New York. I had just finished with Major League Baseball. I was supposed to have a meeting with Nickelodeon. That got moved to the next day. They said, how'd you like to meet Peter Max? I said, sure. They said, meet me over at, gave me his address over on the east side, West Central Park, or East Central Park, I think it was. Went in, got to see his studio. I was in awe. It was just totally amazing. His paintings that he was working on at the time, and this was mid to late 90s, he had these massive paintings in his studio. You can see, here's my studio, by the way. This is like back here. Not everybody's going to see it, but I'll share it with you, Bradley. You can see it.
Thank you.
And it was so impressive and inspirational. And he was just really a nice guy. And I just made me want to start painting even more. And
wow.
So, but things were changing at Sanford. We merged, I guess merged or bought out by Newell Brands. And so a lot of the regime was changing. One of the key players at the company left, and he was from Atlanta originally, came back down here to work for another company, and he started moving us all, stealing people and moving us down here and doing that. And that's how I got to Atlanta. So, and I was playing with a band at the time, band called Rewired, and they're still, I know a lot of these guys. Joe Moss is one of my good buddies from there. We continue to talk to this day. We've stayed friends all this time. He wasn't happy about me leaving, but you've got to, sometimes you got to say, like that book says, you got to tear some things down to kind of rebuild and find the creativity again. I was ready for wanted to find a different music scene, and I know there was a lot happening in Atlanta, something different than what I was doing. And don't get me wrong, we were playing a lot. I was with them for 12 years. This other band, we were open for like Coco Taylor, Lonnie Brooks, Ronnie Baker Brooks. So there were some blues acts in Chicago, and then we started to get booked to open for like Asia at the time. And that was one version. Edgar Winter, who shouldn't be wearing white jumpsuits anymore, but but he did. Little Feet was great. It was a little intimidating because Richie Hayward was standing 10 feet away from me watching me play.
Wow.
Eric Johnson, who was really a very, very cool guy, very laid back, nice guy. Rick Derringer was great. Just a bunch of Leslie West. That was from Corky Lang, Leslie West. And when Leslie West found out that I had this connection with Sharpie, he thought that was the greatest thing. And so I would, I was like I'd drive him around in the golf cart around this festival so that he could go to, it was crazy. So I made sure that he got a bunch of silver Sharpies at the time and stuff. So it was good. John Hyatt and Toby Keith. I remember we played that was a massive festival, and somehow we opened for Toby Keith. Unfortunately he's no longer with us, but that's it. So I came to Atlanta, and I thought I was going to find a different music scene. And the first jam I went to meet musicians, they were playing all blues.
You leave Chicago and go to another city, and then you are playing blues.
You know what? And that's what I'm doing now. I played with Mike Watson for I want to think how long that was. Yeah, close to 10 years. I was playing with Mike Watson, but Mike was more blues, country blues.
Yeah.
And he had this great baritone voice, and I used to sing harmony with him again, because for some reason, these baritones, I can pick parts out better, and it worked out well. And he liked that. I jammed with him the first night and he said, I need a drummer. He says, you want to do it? And I said, yeah, I probably should have talked it over, but I did it. And then Paul Arredondo played with us. He was looking for a bass player. He changed his bass player and drummer. And Paul came in. I'd never met Paul before. We just played, we just clicked. And we were together there for like 10 years with Mike. And that was just phenomenal. It was really well.
I've admired Paul from afar. I mean, being a bass player too. Obviously, I don't think I've ever gotten to play with him, but I know a lot of musicians that have worked with him.
Yeah.
You included. My friend Brian Jarrett played with him for a long time, and yeah, Paul's a great player.
Yeah,
and he just knows. He knows what to play and knows what not to play. And
here's the difference. I think of you and I think of Paul. Paul doesn't sing. So he does tend to focus on the bass part far more than what you do because you focus on the singing. So you have that groove orientation. I play well with both of you, but it's different with you than I do with Paul. And that's exactly from what we were talking about earlier. I think because you're such a phenomenal singer and you know how to focus on what the song is saying and the lyrics and the melody, that pull back on what you're playing and it really makes a difference.
Yeah,
so.
That's awesome.
Yep.
What was if you could compare the blues scene between Chicago and Atlanta, how would you classify that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I classify it as in Chicago from where at the point that I started, it was Buddy Guy and on. Because Buddy Guy is probably the epitome of the electric blues. And that's what it was all about in Chicago. It became electric blues and it wasn't about, although it had a lot of influence from the roots of the blues, my appreciation for the blues diminished because people were just looking at these, what I consider bastardizations of the blues. And I don't want to don't get me wrong, this Led Zeppelin and they're not bastardizations of the blues. They took it, made something unique. Where down here, I have regained a whole new appreciation for the blues, playing with like the Casanovas, for instance. Maurice Nazzaro is probably one of the most knowledgeable, savvy students of the blues that I know. And when I play with him now, I used to have, I would go out, I'll play with just a bass drum, a snare drum, and a hi-hat, and I can make it work. This weekend, I was playing with all brushes just to try to change the vibe. And I love brushes. And it really did change it. And it just really worked. We have a tendency to get a little loud, and it doesn't have to be that way, but I'm more interested in the groove now, making sure that the pocket's there. I listen to stuff that we've played on, and when we played live and it was recorded, and I listened to it and I'm like, what the hell was I doing? Because, the meter's off and it's just, God, I went back and I'm like, there's no excuse for this. And especially with metronomes that you can put on your phone and you can flash them, you can listen to them, put in earbuds. I just really I'm trying to be that groove oriented drummer that really makes it feel good. And the blues, playing with these guys, playing the blues really does that. It can do that. And I want to continue to do it that way. So
that's awesome.
The Purdy Shuffle, you know what that is. And that's one of my favorite licks. And I use that as often as I can because it does just make it work. As a matter of fact, I remember Matt Kaminsky was playing with us one time when we started doing that. And he just I started playing that behind his soul. He just kind of looked over his shoulder, looked at me and smiled. And I thought, that's all I needed.
That's all I need. That's it. That's exactly it. I want to talk a lot actually about your visual artwork as well. And then we can come back and talk about drums some more. But what would you describe your style as a painter? If you had to give it a style or a label, what type of stuff do you typically paint?
It tends to be more realistic. I'm trying to become more loose. Yeah, it's just like everybody else. Anybody else, even in the music industry, you're always you don't want to be pigeonholed as one thing. But for the most part, and I'm looking around at stuff that I have here, and it's all tends to be somewhat realism. And I've been trying to move away from that. And so I'm going to see if I can successfully do that. I've got a couple paintings like this. Well, you can't see it here, but there's one here that I've done that's very, I don't know if you know who Chuck Close is. Chuck Close was a painter, an artist in the 60s who did these. He used to paint his face all the time. And as I followed him over the years and looked at his work, and what he did was he took that same theme and he evolved and broke it down, became more almost fractalized in some way, shape, or form. And with the advent of computers, you can see how that influenced it. And he actually started painting squares. But everything he did, when you stood back, you could see it was his face. Just look him up. It's just...
I'm looking... I'm just looking it up right now as you're describing it. And it has this kind of pixelated quality to it.
That's some more recent stuff that he's done. And then what he has been doing is he breaks it up into these almost organic shapes, and they're just blobs of paint with another blob of color around it. But when the eye mixes it, it's it takes a lot of thought, and that's really what it's all about. That's why I'm trying to get away. I had this, I've never been an abstract artist, and there's probably a good reason for it. I have a lot of respect for abstract artists because I think it's probably one of the higher, more intellectual forms. In other words, they're trying to communicate something with even less than what you're given in a realistic painting. It's a feel, not even a feeling or mood, but it's an attitude. And, it's just, I think a lot of abstract artists think I'm dissing them. I don't like their work because it's abstract. That's certainly not the case. I just don't think that they've achieved the level of intellectual level that should be there when I hope nobody that's painting abstracts are listening to this. You can cut this out, I'm sure.
This is going to be big. This clip is going to be big on in the art world websites.
But it is. It's just abstract artists try to do a lot with as little as possible, and it's not easily achieved. Let me just say that.
And do you think, I'm trying to think of how I want to ask this, do you think that the intention behind, and maybe we do need to cut all this out, but do you think the intention behind that is to put more responsibility on the audience to draw their own conclusions, or do you think maybe it's lacking, I don't want to say ability, art, I don't want to say that, but... I know. No, I know what you're saying. It's certainly not lacking ability. I take a look at, and I loved art history. I probably was going to minor in that when I was in college, but I look at people like Picasso and what he did. There's so much intellectual ability behind what he did that people don't appreciate or don't even realize unless you have studied what he did. There was so much going on at that time, especially when you start to think about the advent of splitting the atom and atomic explosions, these chain reactions. There were these painters. There's one, Marcel Duchamp, called a Nude Descending a Staircase, and it looks just like a bunch of, and you could look at that, you can look that up too, but it looks like somebody called it an explosion in a shingle factory. But it was really, when you think about what they were trying to convey and look at and trying to talk about, art does not deal with a single subject. That single subject might be part of what you're
basis is, it's the model for it. But as I just explained to another artist last week, I know we're going to have to cut this out because I was judging a congressional art show, and all these, some high school students, phenomenal work, absolutely incredible. And some of these more schooled artists are like, they're looking at some of this stuff and they're just saying, oh, well, I like this because I like the way she's sitting. And it looks like the artist is trying to tell us a story about this person. And that's when I said, well, if the artist is trying to tell you the story, then that's more an illustration. It's not fine art. What you should be looking for in fine art is not the subject matter or what the subject's doing, but what are all the elements doing, working together to move your eye around and tell you something a lot more about what's going on the canvas than just what this one person's doing in the photo. You're going to have to cut that. I know you are.
Man,
I just went and I just did it as nicely as possible as I could. And then she said, yeah, okay. Yeah, I get where you're coming from and understood. So, but for the most part, we all agreed on what was chosen. And some of this artwork by these high school students was phenomenal. So anyway, that's, I don't know if I answered your question, but abstract art is one of those things that, I think there are people that do it because they lack ability, but I think there are people who do have a good understanding of what it should be.
Yeah. Well, and while you've been explaining that, I would say that most of my music listening is to contemporary classical music, 20th century, John Cage, Earl Brown, Morton Feldman, and it is the musical version of what you're explaining, and that there's a lot of intentionality and there's a lot of forethought and work done prior to maybe a very minimal piece of music being written, but it is putting the responsibility, I think, a lot on the listener or the audience to make some
It's
some
interesting
decisions
what you say, and I think that I think the artist has to be intentional about what they're doing, whether it's minimalistic or as tight and as detailed as some of the painting, but it does put the responsibility on the viewer to kind of interpret what that all means and everything. So it could be abstract, could be realistic, but you have to look at it and understand what you're saying. The intentionality has to be from the artist. And everything. Yeah. I'm not one of these that likes something random. It reminds me of an old Dick Van Dyke episode where there was an artist who had painted a nude of Laura Petrie, and Rob was trying to get it back. And the artist was who was the lead guy in the show, Alan Brady. Trying to remember, Carl Reiner, and he was playing this artist, and he's creating art on a canvas with squirt guns and shooting paint. And he says, here, Rob, you should do this. You should try it. He says, it's something fun. So Rob's standing there shooting the paint at the thing. And he's like, oh, wait, did you see what he did here? And of course, Rob continues to shoot, and he shoots him in the side of the head. He says, yeah, you just shot me in the air. That's what you did. But he's looking at it. And so Rob says, so you really think this is art? He says, no, this is just crap. I just do this for fun. But it is, and just so my friends out there who do abstract work, it is I regard it as one of the higher forms of artistic expression and communication. So there's a good quote you can use for
there you go
in the show. But I have yet to find that. I'm still working on it. But I think that's my background as a commercial artist as well. And my inspiration coming from album covers a lot, were, kind of influenced a lot of what I do.
Sure.
So
do do you typically work on one piece at a time, or do you have multiple pieces going at one time?
Sometimes I'll have multiple pieces. I think I've had 3 different paintings going at one point. I did one where I started it and I ended up doing 2 other paintings. And the first one sat for almost 2 years before I got back to it. And, but I am still thinking about going and changing it now. So too, and it's been done for 2 years. So, there's just some things I don't like about it. So, and I think that's when you start to realize you're reaching a level of accomplishment or something that that there's something that you want to accomplish. It's just not quite right. And I want to go back and fix it. So
you were talking earlier about the older you get, the more you want to be a groove drummer, the more you want to play less. Do you think that this decision or this desire to change up what you're painting, does the timeline align with that as well? Do you think you're making complete artistic decisions around the same time, or are they 2 completely different things?
I think they're 2 different things. But what I think it is that I am trying to, and I hate to say it, achieve perfection or achieve a certain level of excellence. And I think being a groove-oriented drummer, I told somebody, I said, I liken this to a game of golf. You get the lower your score, the fewer hits you have, the better you are. The same thing about drumming. I said, if you can say the same thing with 10 beats as you can with 200 beats, I think, and make it meaningful, that's the difference. And that's the same thing with painting. If you can make it meaningful don't try to put everything in. And that's where the artist comes in. You have to be discerning what you're going to put in and what you're not going to put in. And when I'm doing photorealism, I take a lot of photography. I use it, and I never paint anything exactly what I've shot. So, it's just been you got to be more discerning. And I think that's what it is. It's becoming more discerning. And I think drumming is that way. And you just have to serve the music, so to speak. So, man,
this episode's just full of great sound bites of Art McNaughton. I'm telling you. This could be great.
Wow.
We could just release an album of sound bites of you saying words of wisdom. It's like deep thoughts with Jack Handy.
Yeah, that's
amazing. Going back to your artwork, I didn't realize until you and I sat and talked about it just how much commercial success and cool opportunities that you've gotten out of your artwork.
Yep.
What are some of the things that you've done? The couple that come to mind are you doing this thing that was on Netflix recently, and then I think you've done some work that this maybe has been used in some TV shows.
Yeah.
What are some of those things you've done?
Here's another good soundbite. I think everything we do, there is always, you learn from just about everything, or you benefit from anything you do. There's nothing wasted. And what I did was I started number of years ago, I started wanting to show my artwork. So what I did was I was starting to contact galleries, different things. One was in Buckhead, the Atlanta Artist Center. And so I submitted some work for a show, got into that show, started showing there, became a member of that organization. It's a 501c3 organization. And so it's all volunteer. Started showing my work and started, winning certain, exhibits and things like that. So while I was there, the Art Center was contacted by a local production company that was located in Decatur and asked if they had any artists that knew how to draw motorcycles or, illustrate motorcycles. And they said, we got just the guy. We'll give you his number, call him and see it. So that's how I got contacted. It was a division of Warner Brothers Studios. They called me. They were working on a TV show called Black Lightning. And they asked me to come down. They looked at my work first. I sent them to my website, saw it. They said, well, can you come down and actually, bring some things with you? Because we might have you sketch some stuff while you're here. I said, all right, fine. And I remember they had a Ducati motorcycle that they were trying to develop and customize for the show. It was going to be shot for, I think, the second season. And they said, well, we're going to have this guy sitting in a chair and he's going to be sitting there holding a pad and sketching a picture of this motorcycle. He's got this thought idea for it. And what we need are the same motorcycle. So you got to do the same photo, but in different stages of progression. I said, okay, I can do that. So I sat there for a day, did that. And they said, oh, this is perfect. This is just, so I said, do you think it could do some other stuff too? We'll call you tomorrow. I said, sure, why not? So that was the first thing. That's how I started. And that did get shot. I got to see that. And I'm trying to remember the actor's name. He was the father on Dexter. You probably remember
I do remember
you know
him.
who the actor is, but he was sitting there and he was sketching it. And I'm like, hey, that's my stuff right there. So then I progressed. I did some other things, other sketches, and there's like two variations they have. They have two categories of things. It's either set design or a prop. A prop is something that the actor is going to be using, like the sketchbook that I did, or set design. It might just be showing in the background or whatever. So I did a series of drawings that were used in the show. I did a portrait of one of the actresses that was for the show. She gets killed off, I think, at the end of the first season. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Somebody wants to watch it.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Yeah. So her brother, who's like a kingpin gangster, has this portrait of her on the wall, that type of thing. And so but there's a series of drawings and things that I did and stuff. There's probably still some stuff that I haven't gone back to look for, but I've seen enough of it and I've captured it. And so I put it on my website. So I did that for about 4 years. It was a great opportunity. And then the creative director for the show, who had moved on and was doing something else for Netflix, contacts me. He says, hey, I've got a project for Netflix. Wondering if you could help me out. I'm working on a movie with Benicio del Toro and Justin Timberlake, and I need a painting. And he explained what they needed. And I have it sitting in the bin over here too. So I got it back, and so I did it and I watched it. I finally got to see the movie because it released back in December, and I finally waited to see it. And sure enough, here it is right behind Justin Timberlake. He's standing in his office, the painting of their offices. And I saw that. Frances Fisher is in the show. She was, if you know who Frances Fisher was, she's an actress who was linked to Clint Eastwood back in the 80s so. And so I did a portrait of her, which I don't think was actually for the show. I think the creative director wanted it to give to her as a gift.
Really?
And I did that. So, but he said, I want it to a young Frances Fisher. I don't want how she looks now. And I'm like, ooh, we better cut that out too, in case she's listening. I don't think I have to worry.
If she's listening, we'll roll the dice on this one. This is cool.
But it was,
I'll deal with the fallout.
There you go. So, but I got that. And that was all through being part of Atlanta Artist Center down in Buckhead, which I had then, after I was there for a while, they had a regime change, asked me if I would take over the presidency, which I was for 4 years, and got some things in order, moved some things around. And, I used a lot of my background because working with Sanford, that was one of the best training grounds for a business that I've ever known. If you needed to understand finances, ROA, how to be profitable, that was where I got it. And that's what I applied to this, and it worked out very, very well for them. So we're doing well. So.
And that is awesome. Yeah, I remember you showed me some photos of some of that work, and I couldn't believe it. I was just blown away. How does that commissioning work? How do you get commissioned? Are you paid for the the product at the end, or is it for the time that they contract you for?
It's usually for the product. We come to they tell me when they need it. So it does the timing kind of enters into it, because a lot of times what they'll do, especially with television production, they have a shooting schedule. They know when they need it, and they'll say, okay, I'll need this by next Tuesday by noon, because we're going to be setting the scene that afternoon, and we're going to be shooting on Tuesday night. So they'll say, you've got such and such a time. So I kind of put that in, but I usually give them a quote beforehand, and then we'll negotiate. And it's always been very amiable. So it's been good to do that. To talk about commissions, that's a lot of my work now is my paintings are commissioned through just people that have seen my work, and they call me to do something they want. Like I had a couple that wanted a painting of Northside Tavern because they had been there in their younger years. We had such memories for them. I was playing there one night with the Casanovas, and they said, we're going to come out and see you, and we want to talk about commissioning. So I said, all right. So I walked outside with them on a break, and I was taking pictures. And I said, well, here's kind of what I was thinking. And so we worked it out. And they said, yeah, that'll be good. And we just negotiated a price. And I said, okay, I can. They said, how soon can we get it? And I said, well, it's going to take a little bit of time, but probably within the next couple of weeks, I can have it for you. And so that's how we worked it out. So, I've got some guy that lives up on Lake Lanier. You're familiar with Lake Lanier, being from here, who has bought several of my paintings and has commissioned me to do one for him. He wants to continue. He wants another one, and we haven't talked about what he wants yet, but we'll get into that. So,
and if someone wants to look at your work and maybe reach out to you about that, where is there a website that they go and check out?
Yeah, they can contact me at Art McNaughton fineart.com, spelled just the way it sounds. And all my information is on there, and they can reach me through that. Or they can go to Atlanta Artist Center in Buckhead. It's atlantaartistcenter.org is the website, and they can reach me. I happen to be the CEO at Atlanta Artist Center now. So if they want to reach out to me there, they can do it that way.
That's awesome. I like there's a good painting. One of my favorites of yours is the one that you did of the exterior of the Varsity. I really like that one.
That one that's going to be down at Colony Square on display next week.
Really?
Yeah, it'll be there for a couple months, I think. So it'll be down there. Yeah.
Do you paint anything from any landmarks from Chicago, or is it typically, are you painting more from Atlanta these days?
Mostly from Atlanta these days. And my aunt, this is one of my greatest regrets. She always wanted me to paint a skyline of Chicago, and I could never find inspiration in doing that, because she says, well, look at this photo. This is great. Why can't you just paint this photo? I said, because it's a photo. And if you want the skyline, why don't you just buy the photo? And so, but I always regret not coming up with something for her, because she was, like I said, she helped my brothers and I. They lived close to us, so we always spent time with them. My brother Roy and I used to go down into the Loop with my aunt, and we would go to different places because we'd walk around with her everywhere. We'd go to the Art Institute. She showed us where the Playboy Club was. And because the Playboy building was still there when I was a kid, that was kind of neat. What was the other big nightclub there? That was right there too. I can't quite remember, but we used to go up to the north side and see all these historic places. The water tower, that's what she always liked. She wanted to go there. So, yeah, there were a lot of places. So I got to know the city pretty well, got to see it, get to experience it. And there's a lot of great places in the city of Chicago. I did get to play at Buddy Guy's, though. So both the
Oh, no kidding.
old and the new. So it was kind of interesting. The old one was just looked like some crummy little bar on State Street, and then they moved closer to the Loop where all the action was, in a nicer, clean place. And I did do a painting of that. So that is from my painting of Chicago. I did do the entrance to Buddy Guys. So
that's cool. Is that on your website?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and that's sold. That sold a long time ago. That sold right away, which was kind of nice. So,
yeah,
I was happy to see that. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
To talk about Chicago for a moment, we live in St. Louis now, and there's just, I don't even know if I can put it into words. Hopefully, you can put it into words better than I can. Just about the just living in the Midwest. There's something so wonderful about the people. And I've noticed going to a lot of music venues and a lot of shows, the people here, they're serious about music. Mm-hmm. They are serious about listening to it. They support it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they don't in Atlanta, because we both know that they do.
Yeah.
But it's just different.
Yeah, it is. And to me, in Chicago, people that support it in Chicago, it's bigger. I'll tell you, we went back to Chicago around 2010, went into Grant Park, and they were having some festival, but they were having a concert. They've got this beautiful new outdoor auditorium in the middle of the day, and it was packed. They were just passionate about it. The Blues Festival down on Lakefront is always pretty incredible. I don't know if they still have it. I believe they do, but that is always well attended. It just, I think one of the things about Chicago is the public transportation is so robust that people can get around you could fly into Midway Airport and take a train straight down into the center of the city and spend time down there. So I used to take the train from down on the south side all the way into the city and walk around the Loop. It was great. But I think public transportation is probably one of the benefits to some of the bigger cities. I don't know how it is in St. Louis. I haven't been there, but
it feels there's a lot of it. It's a big, small town, and I don't think a lot of, at least we live on the west side of the city, and I don't think a lot of people use public transportation to go in. And unfortunately, the downtown area is not as vibrant as it used to be. I think there's a lot of crime downtown, and it's unfortunate because it could be an incredible area for live music. Now there's a lot of new venues around where we live. There's a really, really nice live music venue here that I've been to some really good shows, and it's it's still happening here. It's just I feel like it's moving a little bit out of the city.
Yeah.
So
I think that's probably what's happening in Chicago too. You still have those vital music venues in the city. Gosh, when I just remember back in the 90s, there were places up on the north side that were just especially by Wrigley Field, for those baseball fans about that. Oh, and that's the one thing I heard Matt Kaminsky talking about, playing organ at the baseball park. And he mentioned Nancy Faust, who was the organist at Comiskey Park. She's no longer there. She's still around, but she's not there playing. But I think one of the funny things is my brothers and I all knew who she was. And we used to go, and the organ was set up right behind home plate on one of the mezzanine levels. And you could go around and just watch her play and everything. She was friendly and saying hi. And I was thinking about that when Matt was talking about how he's back in a room. I don't think anybody can even see him or anything. So. He has a monitor and he has a producer in his ear telling him what to play. Is such a shame, it's nobody gets to experience that anymore.
Yeah.
And that was one of the great things about baseball in Chicago. You could see Nancy Faust playing organ. And then there was another one at Wrigley Field. I can't remember the guy's name, but he used to play in a club down on the south side all the time too, like a restaurant. And like on Thursday nights, he would always be there playing. And I can't remember his name. It'll probably come to me when we're signed off. But
I'm a big Atlanta Braves fan. I have been through my entire life, even when they were like 100 people in the stands for the games. But as we're recording this late June, they're doing a 3-game series in St. Louis. And then the next day they're playing a makeup game against the White Sox. And I'm going to all three Braves Cardinals games, and I'm driving up to Chicago the next morning to catch the Braves White Sox.
Good for you, because that's down here. That's the problem, is we just find too many. There's so many Cub fans down here. No, there aren't many White Sox fans down here, and I think it's because of the friendly confines. And I think it was Wrigley Field was in that neighborhood environment where everything, restaurants and family venues and nightclubs were in that area. And I'm not talking about nightclubs like seedy nightclubs, but places where music was played. I remember playing, the Cubs were in the playoffs one year when I was up there, and my brother and I were playing with another set of twins, by the way, called the Twigs. I'm going to give them a little plug because they're still out there. I don't think they're playing much anymore, but Linda and Laura forget their last name real quick here, but Linda and Laura were playing in their band. Anyway, I just remember playing in the club and there's nobody there because everybody is like a block away at the baseball game.
At the baseball game.
And as soon as the Cubs lost, then everybody was in the club. So they were there.
It's I think it's a little bit of tough to be a baseball fan in the city of Chicago right now.
It is, but I still love baseball. I love the White Sox. Linda and Laura Good, that was their name. So I just remember it. So
there you go. Yeah. You can sleep tonight because you remember that.
I can. So
the last thing I want to talk about is you and I both met each other through our pal Mr. Steve Ward.
Yep.
And how did you meet and start playing with Steve?
The first time I met Steve was we were putting on a benefit for a neighbor friend of mine who had cancer. And you probably remember Jim Nicoletta, another friend. And we were having all sorts of music that day. Mike Watson was playing, I was playing, and so on and so forth. And Jim said, I've got these guys that you got to hear. And speaking of Three-Way Street. And I said, well, I've got plenty of people. He says, they'll come. You won't regret having them there. That's the first time I met Steve. They came in, they played, did a 45 hour set. And I met Steve there the first time, and he was just the nicest guy because we had a PA set up. He says, well, I've got my mixer. I'm just going to go in. I was perfect. He was like, no, he is probably one of the most miraculous sound technicians I've ever met. And he is so good with that. And then I heard him, I was blown away. So I started following them and, saying this. And then he said to me, he says, what I'm thinking about doing? I want to have put a band together for my birthday bash, and I think we're going to do it at Montana's. And I'm thinking about getting it, we're going to just do Three-Way Street. We'll do the trailer out in the parking lot, so and so. And I can't remember if that was the first time I played or we did a festival in the food festival in Marietta. In the Marietta Square. And no, it was his birthday bash. That was the first time. And so then he says, we're going to do this in Marietta. We went and played there. So that's when the 2 times I played there. Then he said, I got this guy that you got to hear that sings because we're going to work this out so we can all get together and play. And he was talking about you. And I think I went to the VFW hall and heard you play with Timeless Highway. Was that who it was?
With Tommy Dodd.
With Tommy Dodd, because I met Tommy. And that was another one when I met Tommy. That was the first time. I had heard so many stories about him. I was very intimidated by him at first until we got through the first set. And then he just looked over at me and he pointed and he goes, man, you kicked my ass. And I knew, and we were just good friends ever since. He was just the greatest guy. I love it. But I went and I heard you sing and I'm like, holy crap. I couldn't believe how you could sing.
Oh man.
And so he said, Steve said, we're gonna go to Montana's and we'll get together and we'll get a group. I think it was you, him, me. I think Tommy played maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe so. Yeah.
But then I know we did many trios at Montana's
gigs and then gigs with David,
yep.
gigs with Kenny, and I mean just all kinds of stuff.
Oh, and Kenny, God, another one, man. That's just he's another incredible guy.
Just a walking jukebox. Yep. You know.
But that's and then it was just like we just kept playing and we were busy and it was so much fun. And then
absolutely.
And we miss you.
Yeah,
so
I know. I miss you too. So. I miss you guys too. And so you, through Steve and Three-Way Street, you, of course, then know our pal, Mr. David Ellis, who's been on the show.
Right.
And he's amazing and just a all-around incredible human being and talented dude. And now you guys have a band project together, right?
Ethel's Envy. We get together and Paul Arredondo on bass, David and myself, and we're just out having fun doing it. It's Americana, simple stuff. The more I'm doing it, and this is, do I have it here? Oh, I have this. It's not a cajon. It's a guitar. It's a guitar turned into a cajon, which sounds phenomenal, which I'll have to share it with you sometime so you can see it.
So David was telling me about it.
Yep.
And I think he showed me a picture of it.
And friend of mine, Steve.
So cool.
Steve Bryson had this idea for this thing. And, but his whole idea was he was trying to keep it so that you could play it and it still looked like a guitar, so that there's something that emulated the bridge and everything. And I'm like, it just doesn't have that sound. So I took it. He says, well, play with it and see what you can do. And I mounted a mic inside. I cut a hole in the body just below the bridge, and mounted another piece of plywood on top of that. So you hit it and it's got some nice bottom end resonance and changed. And it really sounds good. I'm having fun playing that. And I'm hoping to do more of that and keep playing that and just chunking away on mandolin and trying to sing and keep myself out of trouble.
That is so cool. Do you stand while you play that?
Yeah. That
is so cool.
You can stand with it and you can let it sit on your lap. So it's either way, it really works. It's kind of like taking that, I loved playing the cocktail kit. That was, again, you talk about reducing things down and trying to get to the bare minimum. That is the epitome of it. And, but I was, I did play in a rockabilly band for a little while, Hard Luck and Trouble. And I was playing thing. And Paul Rothenberger, another phenomenal singer. And I'm surrounded by these phenomenal singers. I'm just very fortunate. I miss that guy. And, but I was playing that thing and we were playing a lot of gigs while I was standing up, and it started to from balancing on my left hip started to bother me from doing that. And so it was getting a little more rough to be standing there and playing that. So I just kind of slowed down everything, but I do it. I pull it out every once in a while, but it's fun. It's fun to play. And it's really, you just worry about making the groove, make everything, just give it a good groove, and the other thing, I'll just make this one other comment is that the other thing that really helped me was Steve had such a phenomenal studio, and he gave me many opportunities to be in there and record on different people's projects. And that really helped me. Because not only are you listening to the click track and, which we've all done. And I was telling you about how the meter, and I was becoming more aware of how my timing and my meter was really suffering, but that really helped and made me think. And the more I started playing for the song and listening to what was going on, helped me make the thing groove more and keep in time, just help that pocket, just find that pocket, smack it, and get in there. So that's a great opportunity. So there's
so much value in recording yourself and hearing it back. And I would go through periods of like carrying a Zoom recorder and just sitting it on my amp and then plugging it into my stereo in my car on the way home. Yeah. and just listen while everything was fresh in my mind and say, oh man, you rush a little bit going into the chorus, maybe when your energy gets a little high, or maybe you sing a little sharp right there. Yeah. So just to kind of hear those objectively those tendencies that you may have. Yeah, it's really, there's a lot of value in that.
We were, the Casanovas were backing up Sandra Hall, who's another blues singer down here in Atlanta. And so I had to learn, her library of music pretty quickly. And so I got my iPad, put everything on there, and set the tempos. And the nice thing about it was I could leave it on the floor, turn the flash of it, so you're not clicking, but I could follow that flash so that I knew that the tempo was right, because she's a stickler for tempos. And plus, she's older, and you've got to make sure that you're playing the tempo that she wants, or else, we're going to wear her out. And it really does help. And it's just great because with all the technology today, it's just amazing what we have available to us to help us improve ourselves. And that's exactly one of them. So
you're exactly right. And you hit it on the head by, as a drummer, as a rhythm section, there's so much responsibility on providing a bed that makes the song easy for the singer.
Yep.
That they shouldn't have to think for 1 second about what's going on behind them. No. They should just be able to sing the song.
And Sandra has some, she's been dealing with some health issues, so she can't be as energetic on stage, and she's got to count on us keeping things solid for her and letting her just do what she does best. That was singing. So hopefully things work out for her. I know she's suffering right now, but we'll see. Yeah. So
I have one final observation, and I'm curious whether this has ever been a conscious thing that you've thought of, but I don't think it's lost on me that you like to use a variety of drums, configurations, sticks, mallets, brushes. Is there some overlap between Art, the drummer, and Art, the visual artist, and that the palette and the brush?
I think so.
It is one and the same, and you're always trying to think of the right color for whatever you're doing.
That's exactly it. And playing with Steve really made me aware of that. Listening to him, and it was, I learned a lot of his arrangements before I ever even played drums with him. And I listened to it, and I just loved what he would do at the song. So he had he was, like you say, the colors, the mallets. I love using mallets with Steve because he has such dynamic range in his music. And you do too. When you're singing with him, it just makes it so much easier. And I love having a variety of sticks like that. Like I said, this past weekend, I played with brushes with the Casanovas, which we never do because we tend to be a pretty powerful band. And but it was right. It just seemed right. And then once we did it, when you hit that snare drum with a brush, it gives it such such fat backbeat that you can't help but smile to hear that. That's, one of the things Matt was talking about when I heard Jeff Hamilton was playing on his recording. I'm like, I love watching just the videos of him playing brushes. I don't know if you've seen any of those.
Oh, I have. I have.
I have such a great appreciation for brushes. And I think that's the problem with a lot of drummers is they don't, and I know it's hosting a number of jams. I know that there are people, particularly drummers, who just want to get up there and be bombastic and say, this is me, I'm here, listen to what I'm doing, and not listening to what other people are doing. And that's why I love using brushes, because it helps you get back. You can lay down a nice groove and still hear the singer, hear what they're doing, and hear all of the parts coming together. It's so much fun. That's the way it should be. But and when I'm working on a painting, obviously I've got different paint but brushes that I use. And I just had this conversation with my brother because his stepdaughter is taking up painting, and what should she get and everything. And I have particular ones that I use. And I said, if I'm doing these are really good, but if you get this, and this, these are good ones. You can swap them out, and they really work well for a variety of things with a variety of styles too. So,
yeah, I mean, because it's like you wouldn't want to, as a gigging drummer, you wouldn't put an entire stick bag full of 2 Bs or 5 As
exactly.
and carry them around for every gig you're going to do. And it's the same thing with that, right? I mean, it's every single thing has its own application and brings out an entirely different thing.
What were the marching drums? The 5S or whatever? I can't even remember what they were.
Yeah, like the tree trunk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But 2 Bs, there was a time I used 2 Bs for certain things. And 7 As, I never, those are pretty lightweight. Never had anything, but I could see me using those now. For certain
Do you
things.
find that the older you get, the smaller the drumsticks get?
No, not really. 5 As are still a pretty good standard size. Mm-hmm. It's a good go-to to use. But there are, what I find? The difference is drumstick doesn't get smaller, but I usually try to find ones with smaller beads. And I'm not a big acorn tip. I love the Regal tip drumsticks. I loved those for wood tip, Regal tips. Hard to find them. You can't find them. I don't know if they make them anymore or what, but they just, for some reason, the balance always worked for me. I could use them in almost any environment, and I'd find them good, that they'd work out well. But 2 Bs, when I was doing the rock stuff, that was...
Oh, man. You use those and then aim for the floor, right? You just...
That's it. Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. So,
well, Art McNaughton, this has been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you, Bradley.
I could sit here and talk to you for the rest of the night.
Yeah, and, I know. But you got to eat dinner sometime, awesome. I'm sure.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna go watch some baseball. I think I'm gonna go watch some Major League Baseball and see what's happening with that. But
all right, well,
so I encourage everyone to go to Art's website. Give me that URL one more time, sir.
Art McNaughton, Fine Art. All one word.com.
I'll put that in the show notes, but everyone go and check it out. Commission him to paint everything, just art to hang everywhere in your house.
I've painted dogs. I've painted cars. I've painted motorcycles. I've painted, what else? Churches.
And David Ellis, if you're listening to this, commission him to paint a picture of you with big muscles playing a banjo. Because that's what the world needs, is a picture of bodybuilding banjo with David Ellis.
I can do that.
That's it. I love you, Art McNaughton. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Bradley.
This has been great.
We'll see you.
All right. See ya. Thanks for listening to the Bandwich Tapes. I'm your host, Brad Williams. The show's theme is called Placation and was written by Mark Mundy. Drop me a line at the email address, thebandwichtapes@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe to receive new episodes of the podcast. And while you're at it, please tell someone else about the show. Thanks for listening.